Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here with our nudist. See, I'm messing up already. Our newest reading, The Polygamist Daughter, Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson. If you're new here, I read the book. I sometimes butcher the words as I just butchered my regular normal speech. I spell them out if I'm not certain. I comment on what I'm hearing, and we just keep reading. So go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into it. She has the title again with what seems to be a picture of her as a toddler or a baby. Yeah, looks like a baby. To my brothers and sisters, all the sons and daughters of Ervil LeBaron, I'll never get tired of rehashing our stories. It's the best therapy. The stories yet to be lived and told will be the best of all. Note from the author. This memoir was written from memory with many details corroborated by close family members. Some names have been changed for the privacy of the individuals. Some scenes have been recreated to the best of my ability, and some of the events described have been compressed for brevity. Various details not known to me at the time of the events have been added to the story to give context to the reader, except in certain circumstances when the words were seared in my mind. The dialogue is not verbatim. It is, however, in keeping with the spirit of the events surrounding them. The same is true of the people. I describe them to the best of my recollection, based on my age at the time these events occurred, our circumstances and experiences, and my impressions of them at the time. I also want to make it clear that my father took the basic tenets of Joseph Smith's teachings, including polygamy, that had been practiced for generations in my family and radically twisted them. My father promoted an extremism that shattered so many lives. I love the fact that she's saying this right now in the beginning to let you know that she has seen what has transpired in her family, and this is how she feels about it. The modern day LDS Mormon Church officially disavowed polygamy in 1890. Within these pages, I tell my story. I hope one day the others tell theirs as well. The others involved tell theirs as well. Forward. We always meet people somewhere in the middle of their stories. I met Anna LeBaron somewhere around chapter 34 of the book you are holding, and I had no idea of the unfolding story that I would become a part of. Her narrative begins with at age 9. I had 49 siblings and ends with, he knows my name, he knows my story, and he has set me free. What happens in between is a shocking and powerful account of a young woman becoming herself, while others wanted her to be anything but herself. Starting as someone who was just one among scores of siblings, Anna has emerged as a one-of-a-kind human being. For someone who was surrounded by demands to obey, comply, serve, and disappear, Anna has done an amazing job of showing up. If you were to meet her now, you would be taken by her kindness and her generosity, by her smile and her positivity, and you would never guess the specifics that you're about to read. I first heard about Anna's journey during a series of conversations between us. I watched her fight and I watched her learn. I watched her pursue fearlessly, or at least it appeared that way from my chair, the kind of truth that would make her free. I watched her write her story in her heart, not knowing that one day she would write it for your eyes. But she almost couldn't help it. It is consistent with the generosity of her life that if she found hope, she would also do whatever it takes to give it to others. If she found life, she would do whatever it takes to offer it to others. Prepare to encounter situations that few of us could actually imagine. Fleeing in the dark of the night, pursued by the FBI, protected by SWAT teams, and traumatized by multiple murders in her family. All of these experiences were part of Anna's life in the cult. But that is not the real story here. While those details may keep your eyes open, the real story will keep your heart open. The real story is about a child born to an evil tyrant, a child who endured far more than just fatherlessness. She endured wickedness. And yet, this young woman, in the darkest of conditions, found the light of fatherhood to be real and profoundly healing. Her discovery unveils a fundamental truth for every human soul. Regardless of your circumstance and your family history, you are made for more. I know that's right. You are more than the sum of your experiences and more than the sum of your humanity. Anna's story meets you in the middle of your story. If you find nothing else in the polygamist daughter, you can find the hope that you too, whether now or later, can breathe the words of Anna's friend in the last chapter. She's overcome. Bob Hamp, founder of Think Differently, Counseling, Consulting, Connecting, and author of Think Differently, Live Differently. What a way to, I like that. I like that, okay, Anna. We're off to a good start already. Prologue. At age 9, I had 49 siblings. Y'all, these numbers are so insane to me. 49 siblings. I didn't play hopscotch with my school friends at recess or watch the Brady Bunch on television with my siblings. My mother didn't pack my school lunch, and my dad didn't give me a hug at the door, wishing me a good day. Instead, my parents, who were on the run from federal authorities, abandoned me in Mexico for about a year, leaving me with a family I didn't know, a family that included a man named Raphael. I was fed each day and had a foam pad to sleep on at night. But I found it difficult to sleep in this strange place so far from my mom. Why couldn't I stay with her and the rest of my family in the United States instead of in this dingy, dusty apartment south of the border? Even though I had grown up in polygamy, I had no idea of the truth. I was auditioning as a potential wife for Raphael at 9 years old. At 9 years old, you guys. My father, the notorious Orville LeBaron, had promised Raphael several of his daughters in marriage. If Raphael, a recent convert to my father's polygamist sect, was still in favor with him when we girls reach marriageable age, typically 15, it would happen. My sisters and I were pawns to be auctioned off to the highest bidder, those followers willing to do whatever my father asked, no matter what it involved. I understood from watching my mom, along with her 12 sister wives and my countless siblings, that no one was allowed to question my father's authority. So, like the others, I obeyed. And even though this life made my stomach ache, I never said a word. Wow. Wow. That's a lot. To be promised to someone at 9 years old and to be put around them, they start grooming these little girls so early. It's sick. Chapter 1. What will we do without you? I stood in the driveway of our Dallas home, clinging to my mother as the sun rose higher in the sky, and begged her through my tears not to go. I couldn't imagine life without my mother. So great was my grief that I barely noticed her 2 sister wives saying goodbye to their own children. We had been living there only a short time, having moved yet again on short notice. I'd been sent off to school that day with no explanation as to why my mom had to leave again. Usually, she left without notice and would come back in a few days or sometimes weeks. This time was different. She didn't know when she would be back. So he's on the run, and rather than leaving, the wives with their kids, he takes them with him. Now, I don't know if that's because he didn't want authorities to question the moms, or if it's because he wanted to make sure that his wives were with him so he could do what he pleased. I'm sure mom felt like she had no other choice. She was obeying my father's order. Ervil LeBaron led the Church of the Lamb of God, a radical offshoot of the Mormon Church, and Anna Mae was the fourth of his 13 wives. Like the other wives, she learned early on to do as she was told. My mom, raised in Arizona, had met and married her second husband, Nephi, when they were both part of the traditional Mormon Church, known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Nephi attended one of Ervil LeBaron's exhaustive talks and eventually bought into my dad's more radical offshoot of Mormonism. He hurried home to tell my mom that the way they'd be living, he hurried home to tell my mom that the way they'd been living out Joseph Smith's teachings was all wrong. When she remonstrated Nephi's invite Ervil to their home to convince my mom that they needed to convert and follow this new prophet. Ervil was powerfully persuasive, so much so that Nephi and my mother not only converted, but agreed to relocate to Colonial LeBaron in Chihuahua, Mexico. Nephi stayed in Arizona to sell their home, but my mom went ahead with their 5 children. These people had a home and they were living fine where they were at. And this man is able to talk this guy into believing into his way of doing things. And as a result, he sells his home and uproots the kids and their mom. During this transition, she spent an inordinate amount of time with Ervil, who, while tall, handsome, and charismatic, was also narcissistic, entitled, and manipulative. He proclaimed that he had a revelation that it was God's will and plan for my mom's life that she leave Nephi and marry him instead. She fell madly in love with Ervil, and like the other sister wives before and after her, she succumbed to his potent influence. They married, and she had 7 more children with him, including me. Please, Mom, don't go. On the driveway, I wrapped my arms around my mom's waist, my tears dampening the front of her faded denim dress. Anna, I don't know, Keturah, she said firmly. Like most mothers, Mom always included my middle name when I stirred up trouble. She named me her 10th child after herself, but insisted on a different pronunciation, Anna, that she heard while pregnant with me. Oh, Anna, not Anna, Anna. Stop crying. You're 7 years old. Crying doesn't do anything good. She bent over and kissed my cheek. I placed my hand over the spot to hold in her warmth as long as possible. Helpless, I watched her get into that beat-up Chevy with 3 of Dad's other followers, along with the other kids and a few remaining adults. I watched them drive away, hoping Mom would turn around and wave or smile at me one more time. She didn't. My 13-year-old sister, Kathleen, took my hand, pulled me into the house, and did her best to comfort me. This wasn't her first time being left in charge of the kids in my mother's absence. Those of us left behind in Dallas were supported by the adult women in our group who worked at the family's used appliance business. Although majority of the income generated from the family business went to my father, The sister wives, even nursing mothers, spent long days, often 12 to 14 hours of back-breaking labor at the store. Just one of the many abuses they endured under my father's control. Because in my opinion, what I'm noticing in a lot of these books is the women often have more labor and do more work than the husbands. But that's just my opinion. Tell me yours. We children witnessed some of the other abuses, but all of us had been conditioned to keep silent. While the women were gone, Kathleen cared for me, Adam, Hiram, Celia, Marilyn, Manuel, Virginia, and other children of my mom's sister wives. To pass the time, Kathleen played games and read to us, activities she preferred over the never-ending housework. Though Kathleen did her best to scrape together meals to feed us, when the sister wives got home, they would scold her for not cleaning up the mess made by so many toddlers and young children. She's a kid. And they're scolding her because she didn't do enough cleaning, even though they left her in charge with all these kids to make sure that they eat and all this other stuff. This is what I'm talking about. When we were all together, I quietly observed the interactions between the sister wives. Some had petty jealousies, and a few spoke catty behind each other's backs. Others got along well, especially biological sisters married to the same husband. As teenagers, two of my mother's daughters, Ramona and Faye, were given in marriage to Dan Jordan, my father's right-hand man. Ramona became Dan's sixth wife at age 17 because all the girls are good for is to sell them off to these other guys, apparently. This is just... Later, Faye was sealed to him following her 16th birthday, along with my stepsister, Amy. Since the blessed event, making them wives, number 7 and 8, took place on the same night, Ervil flipped a coin after performing the double ceremony to see which of the girls would share the marriage bed with her new husband that first night. Faye was relieved when Amy was chosen to spend that first night with the 40-plus-year-old man. This is sick. They're kids, and they don't even have a choice in the matter. So in my world, this is, these are predators. We'll say that because that's a safe word for YouTube. These are predators, and they're preying on these kids. These hurried ceremonies were performed in secret. In many cases, the other wives knew nothing until after the fact. Even if the girls in our group dreamed of being courted, dating, or marrying different young men, they never experienced that kind of happily ever after. Those type of relationships were seldom allowed because the old men want the young girls. The older men in Dad's sect preferred younger and younger wives, and they managed to get their way with each successive marriage. At first, group members frowned upon underage unions and quietly protested when the older men began to court teenage girls, but the leaders became even more emboldened, and the disapproving whispers and looks from the older wives did nothing to stop the practice. A few months after my mom left us in Dallas, Kathleen roused me from a deep slumber. "Wake up, Anna. It's time to go." As usual, no one had told me that we were moving again, but I knew the drill. I gathered a couple of items within reach and padded down the long hallway behind my older siblings. None of us had many personal possessions, since we left behind most of our belongings with each move. What we did have, we kept in small cardboard boxes, which, if we were lucky, we could grab before leaving the house. An extra change of clothes and a few special trinkets were treasures that we would keep well hidden so other siblings wouldn't take them, claiming them as their own. We felt rich when we had a full deck of cards for a card game, a diversion that would keep us entertained for hours. Speed, war, and slapjack were my favorite. Yeah, I didn't get to play a whole bunch of card games as a kid unless I went to my grandmother's, and my grandmother's sister-in-law, she would let me play like those games. She taught me how to do those. So I'm hearing that and it's like, oh yeah, the nostalgia of it. When we got outside, I blinked several times, then wiped the sleep from my eyes as I tried to see my surroundings under the heavy cloud cover. Keep moving, a husky voice barked. I felt someone thump me on the back of my head. I turned slightly and stuck out my tongue at my brother Arthur, only because I knew he couldn't see me in the inky darkness. I was wearing flip-flops, and with the next step, I stubbed my toe on a piece of the crumbling driveway and nearly fell. My rubber sandals fell off, and I had to scurry back a couple of steps to retrieve it. Another man, Alex, helped herd us kids as well. Clearly, they were in a hurry to get on the road. Anna, cried the thin, fearful voice of Celia, my sister, closest in age. I'm right here. She took my hand, and I asked her to help me find my sandal. We felt around in the dark until she found it just off the driveway in the weed-ridden yard. I quickly slipped it back on, and we fell back in line with the others. Do you know where we're going? Celia whispered. I heard Arthur saying something about Colorado. Oh, I hope so. That's where Mom is. We clung tightly to one another and to the hope of seeing our mother again. I can't see anything. Where are the cars? We both knew we would need at least 2 vehicles to transport all of us kids on the 800-mile trek from Dallas to Denver. Just as I opened my mouth to say I didn't know, the clouds parted slightly and a full moon revealed a large box truck sitting at the end of our cracked driveway. We're not going in there, are we? My surprise and disgust carried my words slightly too far, reaching Arthur's ears at the front of the line. Oh boy. As he directed everyone to open the back of the box truck, he hissed at each one, get in, find a place to sit, and be quiet. Absolutely no talking. Then he spun around and headed towards me. He yanked my arm hard and held me in place while the line of my siblings marched on toward the truck. Celia could only watch, her countenance filled with compassion mixed with confusion. Arthur leaned down, his face only inches away from my own. I could smell the peanut butter on his breath. Shut your mouth and get in. You know we're doing this to build God's kingdom. Do you think I need to hear you complaining? No, I stammered, trying to wrench free from his firm grasp. He tightened his strong fingers around my upper arm until I felt certain they would leave a mark, or worse, a bruise. It's not that deep. It's not that serious that you have to sit here and assault, because this is what you're doing, this little girl, for saying that she hopes that they're not going in this scary looking box truck. Then I better not hear another peep out of you. He quickly released my arm and shoved me in the middle of my back, propelling me forward once more. I stutter-stepped, but managed not to fall or lose my flimsy flip-flop again, and climbed in the back of the truck. The space inside was dimly lit by a couple of flashlights held by older siblings. Someone had spread a few moving blankets across the floor of the truck, but these did little to soften the hardwood floor. I wrinkled my nose at the pungent odor of mothballs mixed with the greasy residue on the blankets. Scanning the truck for Celia, I quickly spotted her midway back. She patted the floor next to her, indicating she had room for me beside her. Even the slight movement of her hand echoed throughout the empty space and garnered startled looks from the older siblings. I scurried next to Celia, sat down cross-legged, and leaned up against the metal wall behind me. We sat quietly for what seemed like an eternity. Even a sigh or a heavy breath brought worried glances from other siblings because Arthur had told us not to make any noise. I didn't even want to imagine what the adults might say or do if one of us younger ones actually spoke up about our confusion or fear. Celia and I clutched one another, and that small reassurance helped me keep my rising whimpers at bay. Finally, Arthur appeared at the back of the truck. He grabbed the door handle and pulled it down, and the door rattled shut, leaving us in darkness except for the faint light of the flashlights. Moments later, the tired truck sputtered to life. The way it squeaked and groaned around every turn, I worried that we wouldn't make it out of our neighborhood, much less anywhere else. It bounced in and out of potholes as we made our way onto a Dallas freeway en route to Colorado. After a while, the noise provided enough covering for me to safely whisper to Celia, "What do we do if we have to go to the bathroom?" Celia only shrugged her shoulders, but I could see dread in her eyes. Thankfully, Arthur and Alex, who took turns driving, made scheduled, reasonable potty breaks. They even gave us a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter along with a butter knife after one stop at a gas station and convenience store. It was all we had to eat, but it still was something. I gobbled up my sandwich in mere moments. We played guessing games about where we were headed and told stories to pass the time. I managed a fitful sleep, but when I woke, I was stiff and sore from lying on my side. It took me a moment or two to get my bearings. My ears were buzzing from the constant noise of the motor and the grinding gears that were mere inches from where I rested my head. But ringing ears and stiff muscles seemed a small price to pay to see my mom again. I hoped the truck would hold together long enough to get us to our destination. Finally, the loud, constant hum of tires on pavement traveling at highway speeds lessened. The truck careened one direction, then the next. We held on to one another for stability when we weren't lying down. One of the older kids turned a flashlight back on. "I think we're almost there. Gather up your stuff." All I had with me was a worn stuffed rabbit and a ponytail holder. We called them bolitos, Bolitos, around my wrist. Celia held her prized possession, a worn Raggedy Ann doll, to her chest. When we finally came to a stop, the rolling door was opened with a deafening rumble that reverberated off the metal walls. Celia and I squinted in the bright sunlight, thankful to hear nothing but the relative quiet. I saw a figure outside the back of the truck. Something familiar about it made me sit up. "Mom?" I yelled as the tears started welling up in my eyes and the ache in my heart began to ease. I clambered over my siblings to get to the edge of the truck bed, leaned over and hug my mother's neck. "I never thought I would see you again. Anna Keturah, I don't know how to say this, Keturah. Stop being so dramatic." She held me tightly for a few seconds, then peeled me off and searched for her other children who needed hugs as well. "She's not being dramatic. She missed her mom. And they spent a lot of their life basically on edge because she gets taken away at any point in time and they don't even know how long she's going to be gone." So I don't blame her for hugging her mom and being dramatic when seeing her. Celia, my other siblings, and I experienced a few blissful days. Blissful only in the sense that we were reunited with our mother, not in less work or more comfortable living conditions. This new home in Denver was completely run down, like all the other barely affordable houses we rented. The cramped 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house sheltered about 20 of us, which meant constantly crowded conditions. Mom, her children, and the other children in her care shared this home with Teresa and Yolanda, 2 of my mother's sister wives, and their 6 children. I didn't realize it at the time, but mom shouldered enormous responsibility. She cared for her own 7 children, the ones who were still minors, as well as 4 other children who belonged to Beverly, mom's sister wife who was in prison. What was she in prison for? But that wasn't all. Mom was given charge of her sister wife Mary Lou's children when Mary Lou lost her short battle with cancer. I don't remember ever meeting Mary Lou, but I do recall the day that 2 of her 6 kids showed up at our house when Mom was gone for a couple of weeks and Kathleen was in charge of us children. The newcomers, technically my half brother and half sister, spoke little English, and I could see the fear and worry etched on their faces. I remember my mom taking us aside after returning home and instructing us to be kind to them because they no longer had a mother and they were separated from their older siblings. They lived with and were cared for by my mom from then on. Even though we all had our own mothers, we were expected to obey all of the sister wives. Teresa and Yolanda meant well, but if you got on their nerves, as children tend to do, they pick up any nearby object to administer a spanking. Their go-to items included a long-handled spoon, a back of a hairbrush, or even their shoe, which they remove in a pinch if we misbehave or didn't do what we were asked to do. Abuse. That's what it was. We try to act like this is an appropriate form of punishment. I, over the years, have felt like when I look at the way that I was punished, that it was abusive. So when it came to my child, I quickly changed some things. And this, grabbing spoons and stuff, it's abusive. As always, my sisters and I spent hours washing dishes, plastic margarine tubs that served as our only bowls, and doing laundry while Mom, Teresa, and Yolanda were working at the used appliance store. We took our time with the household chores we were assigned in the absence of the adults. I'm not hearing a whole bunch of school here with all the things that they have to do. I'm not hearing a whole bunch of school. My life in Denver brought many challenges, but being separated from my mother was not one of them. So it seemed nearly perfect to me. I recall a few happy moments in the Xavier Street house, playing Monopoly and card games inside. In the backyard, we played tag or caught grasshoppers to see who could hold on to one the longest, squealing in horror as they wiggled around in our hands. At night, we each spread our threadbare blanket on the living floor, and lapped half of it over ourselves to create a thin makeshift sleeping bag. As usual, I snuggled near Celia, thankful to be away from the large cockroaches we'd come to fear in Texas. We giggled and whispered about playing house and dreamt of having new dresses all of our own. While in Denver, I first heard a phrase that I didn't understand but didn't dare to ask about it. Hot lead, cold steel, and a one-way ticket to hell. What I didn't know then was that nearly 2 years later, hell would be unleashed right on our doorstep. Chapter 2. On September 23rd, 1977, I had just nodded off when the front door burst open and the bright lights filled the room. FBI! Yelled several voices as half a dozen federal agents ran through the door. Then a deep voice boomed, "Stay where you are and show us your hands." Slowly. From the blanket cocoon I shared with Celia, I enlarged a tiny hole and peeked out. A tall, lean, red-haired FBI agent was holding his arms out straight like sticks, gripping a gun in his hands. He continued shouting into the room, which was crowded with children who had been wakened abruptly. "Nobody move! And let me see those hands now!" Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I've been taught how to react during an FBI raid. We were told that our dad had enemies who wanted him arrested or worse, dead. We were taught that we were being persecuted because we were God's chosen people. Knowing his enemies might tip off authorities as to his whereabouts, my dad instructed my mom and the other sister wives about the importance of training all the children for this and other scenarios. They coached us to keep silent under all circumstances. And if for some reason authorities forced us to speak, our only answer would be, I don't know. I can recall first the adults and then our older siblings drilling us on this multiple times, acting out potential scenarios we might face with different types of law enforcement. Other kids our age played make-believe cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians. We did that too, but we also played FBI agents and fugitives. The sad reality was that we weren't playing, we were rehearsing for situations that could likely occur. The fact that they have to do this, their childhood was constantly disrupted because of the choices of their mothers and their father. What do you say if they ask you if you're tired? Arthur's face pressed close to mine. He was the drill sergeant, and I was the new recruit. I don't know. Good. What do you say if they ask you if you're hungry? I don't know. Good. What? If you're hungry? You don't know if you're... But what if I'm hungry? Arthur glared at me, then rolled his eyes. It doesn't matter. Listen, this isn't rocket science. You never ever tell them anything except, I don't know. Do you understand? Yes. I bowed my head in shame for my stupidity and tucked away this thought for future drills. Never ask questions. Those men are bad guys. They hate us for what we're doing. Just because they don't understand the Lord's work, they think it's okay to persecute us. But it's not okay, is it? No. My lips quivered so much I could barely form the word as I thought about the hateful FBI and their eagerness to hurt, even kill my family. Now, I don't agree with the way that they handled a lot of these situations with polygamous families and how they separated the kids from their moms and all those things. And I think that there are some instances where they were helping and many where they were hurting. But I really, really don't like the fact that y'all are holding weapons out on kids. I don't. I get that you don't know who's in the room. I just feel like it's just too much. And these kids are already taught to fear you. So imagine how traumatic that was for those kids in that moment. Just do what we tell you and everything will be all right. The red-haired agent repeated his directive, his voice low and controlled this time. I didn't show my hands or pull off the blanket, but I did sit up so I could better see the action through my peephole. I scooted closer to Celia, trying in vain to calm my fears. Red kept an eye on us kids while the other agents fanned out through the house, some cautiously heading into the kitchen and others down the long hallway to the adults' bedrooms. They moved stealthily and announced themselves before they opened any doors. After a few minutes, they herded all the older kids and the mothers they had found into the cramped living room with the rest of us. We huddled together in silence while federal agents searched every inch of that house, both upstairs and downstairs. They dumped out cardboard boxes with our few articles of clothing in them. From the noises in the back of the house, I imagined that they were doing the same thing in the bedrooms and the bathrooms. One of them shouted from the detached garage, "Hey, come get a load of this." Immediately, 2 agents dispersed heading outside. I could hear their faint muffled voices outside, deep and low. Moments later, they reappeared. A stocky man with a bald patch down the center of his head said, "I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Agent Red, now more relaxed, with gun holstered, asked, "What's that?" They probably have 200 loaves of bread, donuts, and snack cakes stacked up in that garage. Red's jaw dropped at the news, replying to Baldy as if we weren't there at all. With as many of them packed into this house, it probably won't last long. While they poked fun at our family's ways, I whispered to Celia, I hope they leave us soon. I wonder what they are looking for. I felt an elbow in my ribs. A painful jab from one of my older siblings. I muffled a cry in protest. Shh! Red narrowed his eyes, looked in our direction, and walked over to us in a show of authority. I could see red bumps on his neck from razor stubble. I felt sure I was in trouble, but a moment later, he returned to his post near the front door. Baldy set up a makeshift interrogation station in the kitchen table at the kitchen table. The adults were questioned one by one. I love her names for them. I strained to hear, but they spoke in hushed tones, and the activity of the other agents drowned them out. I knew my turn would come. It seemed as if several hours passed, which is a long time for a 9-year-old to remain silent in the midst of such stress. But still, I knew sitting on the floor, huddled with Celia, was better than being questioned, so I waited and watched. Baldy finished questioning the adults, though he didn't get any helpful information. He jotted down a few notes, then stood and headed toward the front door in the living room, where Celia and I had sat since the men first descended upon our home. I'd never been more grateful for my big sister, older than me by 2.5 years. We continued clasping hands under the blanket during the entire raid. Her presence strengthened me and gave me a confidence I didn't know I had. If we had been interrogated, we would have done fine. We were extremely well coached. Thankfully, they left all of the kids alone this time. After what seemed like hours, the FBI agents left and we began cleaning up the mess they had made. The majority of our religious teaching came from my dad's prophetic revelations. However, my mom and the other sister wives allowed for us who wanted to go to Sunday school to board a church bus that came down our street every morning. At the local church, teachers handed out prizes to kids who took home handouts, answered the questions, and then brought them back the following week. I didn't always know the answers, but I sure wanted the sticks and little plastic dime store toys they handed out as prizes. One Sunday morning, our teacher asked my age group, "Who is God's son?" I had no idea what the correct answer was. After attending Sunday school a couple of times, I caught on to the fact that no matter what question they asked, answering Jesus meant I was right about half of the time and would get rewarded for getting the answer right. I never spoke that name at home, though. The sister wives and other adults only spoke that name with derision, Derision, if it was spoken at all. The difference was stark, and the kindness of the Sunday school teachers and the bus ministry workers stuck with me. In January of 1978, all of us kids went back to school after Christmas break. Okay, so here we go. They're finally going to school. Though school tended to be a blur of faces and places because of our many moves, I recall this month clearly. The entire city had worked itself into a frenzy about the Denver Broncos playing in the Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys. Denver Broncos, my brother's team. Cowboys, my team. Don't ask me how we got these teams. I don't think my sister has a team, but I'm just saying. Excuse me. Where am I at? My sister Kathleen was a huge Denver Broncos fan. We owned an old television, and adult family members would gather around to watch the football game each week. Even though the poor reception made the image grainy and hard to see, the younger kids were shooed away. One morning at school, our teacher stood before the class and announced, "The Denver Broncos organization has asked our school to make a spirit banner. Everyone who wants to can write something on it to help spur on the team and fans. They're actually going to hang our banner along one of the hallways of the stadium." The class buzzed with excitement about this project. At the appointed time, our teacher led us to the hallway where the banner hung along the wall that backed up to the library. I stood and stared at the banner, not really knowing what to do next. A girl in my class handed me a brown crayon and said, "Come on, don't you want to cheer on the Broncos?" I stared at the brown crown, then back at the banner. Suddenly, I knew I didn't want to use plain old ugly brown. I walked over to the bin of crayons atop a desk someone had pulled into the hallway, and I selected bright orange instead. I knew enough about the Broncos' nickname was the Orange Crush. I had no idea what to write, so I simply copied what another student had pinned much further down the banner from where I stood. Though I'd never even watched an entire football game in person or on TV, working on that banner helped me connect with the other kids in my class. Participating might sound like such a little thing, but the act made me feel normal and included. It gave me the opportunity to be part of something bigger than myself. Her being able to write on a banner with the other kids changed her. Think about that. I wonder what type of experiences she had prior in school that this one moment meant so much to her. Truth is, I couldn't have been more ignorant of what a Super Bowl was. I didn't know anything about football, but I didn't care about any of that. I cared about feeling like I belonged. Working on that banner gave me something in common with my fellow students. I felt like an outsider my whole life, constantly hearing in my head the sister wives' warnings against making friends outside of the family, never fraternizing with the enemy, they say. Worse, we felt conspicuous when we were singled out as different because of our own faith. In fact, mere weeks before the Super Bowl hype, the faculty at school sent all of our family's children to the library during the class Christmas parties. They told me my mom had directed them to sequester us because we don't celebrate pagan holidays. So as silly as it may sound, the Super Bowl excitement allowed me to be a chameleon. I didn't stick out in my ratty, outdated clothes or because of my unusually large family. For the first time in my life, I found something outside of the cult that allowed me to safely and inconspicuously participate. And oh, the joy of blending in. And that is where we're going to stop for today. I think this is going to be a very good book. I'm excited about it already just because she's jumping in. I like that we're getting, a little bit of history, but we're not getting drowned in it. Interesting how much she's already going through at age 9. All of these moves, all of this laying on the floor. It's really, really rough conditions that I feel like we often don't think of. You guys, let me know what you thought of this reading. Like the video, as I said earlier, because it does help the channel. We are on the road to 5,000, and I hope to get there sooner than later. Until next time.